Good afternoon. Welcome to the Healthy Indoors Show. I'm your host, Bob Krell. I'm the publisher and founder of Healthy Indoors Magazine, and I'm happy you could join us here this Thursday. Today is a topic that's near and dear to me because I've been involved in the environmental consulting side of this topic. But our topic for today is life after mold. And is there actually life after mold? To that end, we're really lucky to have our guest with us, Dr. Lauren Tessier. She's a naturopathic physician. She's licensed in the state of Vermont. She created a practice, Life After Mold, and it's the East Coast only CIRS certified naturopathic practice. And we'll have to ask her what CIRS is because I actually don't know. And she's currently also the president of the International Society for Environmentally Acquired Illness. So that's great. So I'd like to welcome Lauren. How are you?
Good. How are you?
Great. Thanks for joining us today. We've got just a bevy of questions, but the first one. So that acronym, what does that mean?
Oh my goodness. So CIRS is also known as CIRS. Some people pronounce it Sears. It's the jury's still out on the pronunciation sometimes, depending on regional dialects. But it's one of the few types of mold illness. It's one of the few types that mold can interact with the body. And so CIRS stands for chronic inflammatory response syndrome. And it's when there's an incendiary event, an incendiary something that gets the fire of inflammation going. And then the fire continues long after that starting event has diminished or left or been gone. So that is one of the type of mold illness. And it's only in a handful of my clients as I've come to experience over the years, a little less prevalent than I originally potentially thought it would have been.
Okay, well, that answered it for me. And I've heard the term before. I wasn't familiar with the acronym. It totally threw me off. And the other thing I think we need to define is a naturopathic physician.
Yeah, thank you for that.
That's another new term for me. I've got to be honest. I'm learning a lot today already.
Yeah, so a naturopathic physician is a physician that's gone through naturopathic medical school. So it is a doctoral degree. Another additional, it's a postgrad, so usually about 4 to 5 years, depending. And we leave school with the ability to practice as a primary care physician or eventually, go into a specialty field. We are licensed in different states around the country. Unfortunately, we don't have federal recognition. This is something that we really push for. And because of the lack of federal recognition, there are people who call themselves naturopaths that haven't actually gone to a accredited doctoral program. So there's a little bit of a mishmash out there of people who say they're naturopaths and might cause a lot of harm in some folks versus someone who's been trained as a physician and who is licensed as the state that they're in, which is why, of course, I say that I'm licensed by Vermont, so it's clear to people that I'm actually a practicing physician here.
Yeah, that's somewhat alarming, actually, that that moniker is misused because from the standpoint of the clientele, right, the consumers, is it clear to them? I mean, do they know the difference?
No, and it's not clear to them at all. Well, for some, I should take that back. For some people, it's very clear for them. And so, yeah, it's hard because I think our profession has really fought to be properly represented. Like in the state of Vermont, I have full prescriptive authority. I have the same prescriptive authority as an MD, from everything from chemotherapeutic drugs to scheduled medications, things like that. How much do I use them? Not often, because I tend to like more of my, natural and holistic tools that actually focus on biochemistry from nutrients, from a nutrient perspective. But, when you need a medication, there's a rhyme and reason for everything, so I definitely don't throw the baby out with the bathwater on that front.
So you, in our pre-show, we discussed this a little bit. So I've been involved as a consultant in the industry, and actually mold was one of the things I was early involved with in the early 90s. And I got to watch some of the morph of the industry over that period of time. We were doing it before I think the term mold remediation existed. And it was always challenging to me, to people that would, say, say they had issues, and then they'd go to see their physician, and they would get, pretty much either sidestepped or dismissed by their family practitioner or whoever they were seeing. And is that still happening? I mean, are you seeing that?
Oh yeah, to an extent. And that's one of the reasons why I put life after mold in the title of my practice. I'm sorry, my camera is a little bit wiggly. I'm so sorry today, guys. This is
that's okay.
Poor production value.
It's interesting that you even mentioned production value, because you're like one of the first guests that actually realizes that. So that's in that and of itself totally redeemed you.
Oh, good. Okay. Well, if my camera falls over, that's my out then.
At least you probably won't have a catwalk across the table. We've had that live in the show.
Well, I'm not home today, so it would be a possibility if I were home today. So what were we just mentioning? I want to hop back to that.
As far as the conventional medical practitioners, conventional doctors, family practice, general practitioners, that somebody, that believed that maybe they had a mold exposure and had issues, they, would go to see, their primary care physician, right? But traditionally, from what I've seen, is usually those individuals, those professionals, are not necessarily versed in diagnosing or even dealing with these issues, and they tend to either dismiss it or just mishandle it. Is that still the case?
Right, it is still the case. And that's actually one of the reasons why I put mold in the name of my practice, is because even as a primary care physician at the time, when I first was cutting my teeth and getting set up, it was really hard to try to convince people that mold could be an issue in their home. Because even for some people, it was like, mold is a 4-letter word. Mold means I'm dirty, which it doesn't. I want to be really clear about that. But it's hard, because a lot of physicians, it's not that they don't believe people. There's a lot of Western medical doctors out there that go, I don't know. And I think I don't know is better than no, that's not possible. And I think as time has marched on, there's more doctors who kind of lean a little bit more to that I don't know what it could be. And I think that actually leaves a door open, instead of medically gaslighting people and telling them that, like, there's nothing here, it's all in your head, because you don't have an allergy here on paper. Here's a antidepressant medication, and let's see if that does anything. So yeah, it definitely still happens.
Well, I mean, you mentioned allergy too, that just because that's only maybe one potential response, right, to mold exposure. But that's when everybody's, I think in the medical community, the IG responses and the whole, the allergy practice focus, I think that's the first thing, right, that they go to is, are you allergic to mold or not? People always, the potential clients will come up and say that, well, we don't have a mold allergy. Well, okay, that's great. What does that mean?
I'm so sorry. This is never an issue. I apologize. This is driving me nuts. So with allergies, there are 4 different ways that mold can interact with the body. And I usually tell people it's like 4 overlapping circles. If people remember back to like Venn diagrams, I don't know if that rings a bell to people. So we're having 1, 2, 3, 4. And so somewhere in there, they all overlap and intersect, right?
Okay.
So there's mold allergy, which is widely followed by the Western medical tradition. And the mold allergy is mediated by something called IgE. And usually they do this by like skin prick testing. Sometimes they will do blood testing for it. And the problem with that is there's lots of different ways that mold can react through kind of an allergic picture without necessarily having an allergy. So
you are fighting your camera.
I'm fighting my camera.
That's okay. Take a second and get it locked in, because I don't want you to feel uncomfortable.
Gosh.
We're all friends here. It's all good.
Sorry, guys. Disappointing.
Trust me, you could be in a studio with hundreds of thousands of dollars worth of equipment and have stuff malfunction. You'll see how disappointing that is. My whole retirement is tied up in hardware here when it doesn't function properly. You're good.
Good. Everyone, fingers crossed for me, please. We got
Well, you can
20
just
people
follow
in
the
here
camera. It's
listening.
kind of like a moving shot, so you just kind of move along with it. Wherever it wanders to, you'll be down on your
Oh,
desk pretty soon.
right. Clearly, humor is important to me for everyone who's paying
It's clearly
attention.
important to
Yeah,
me too, so you
right.
fit in very well here.
So with allergy, right? So usually the whole typical allergy, they'll either do like a blood test or they'll do a skin prick. The problem is there's only a handful of lab specimens that they can compare to. So if you do a mold allergy panel, they might not be testing for the substrain of cladosporium that you're exposed to, and therefore you won't light up as positive. There's also the possibility of maybe you have an antibody deficiency and your body doesn't make those antibodies as much. And then we've also seen situations in some of the medical literature where kiddos who have been exposed, I believe it was Aspergillus niger, in a school setting, they developed all these allergies to stuff their body had never seen before, like horse dander and all this, but then their IgE for Aspergillus fumigatus didn't light up. So the allergy just makes a really small subsection of what has actually happened for people. And if we depend on allergy, we're missing everything. And that's just one picture. So if we just think it's allergy, then we miss kind of infection colonization where the mold is actually in the body. We miss the toxic element, which is one of the other circles where the mycotoxins that are produced by certain molds can have a toxic effect on your body. We miss that if we just focus on allergy. And then the last thing we miss can be SIRS, which is that inflammation that was started by having that exposure to that mycotoxin. So yeah, when people go really myopic and focus on allergies, you miss a whole thing. But one of the things to remember is if you're ever, and I'm not a lawyer, but the way to really demonstrate your case is to speak the language of the insurance companies and the lawyers, and that language happens to be what traditional allopathic medicine uses, and that language is either allergy or infection. And so sometimes, even though allergy might not be the most important thing in a case for me, more the toxic picture is, sometimes it's beneficial to demonstrate that positive allergic reaction for people.
And so, I mean, that seems like it could be a potential quandary though, because I'm assuming that many patients that you see would be affected in more than one of those four areas. It could be a combination, right?
Yeah, hence why all the circles overlap, right?
Right. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely.
So that's, and you can see where a lot of people are missing that, because I think most of the people that are watching the show on the consulting side, I've heard that numerous times. Their clients will typically start discussing allergy, and then mycotoxins get brought up in some way, shape, or form because of all the media publicity for toxic mold. But infections, and I got to say, I you've mentioned in the pre-show that there seems to be a higher incidence of fungal infection than you originally thought existed. That, to me, that's really astonishing, because I've always been under the belief that only people that are immune compromised,
Mm-hmm.
or it's a certain subset of people are agricultural workers, maybe a certain subset, but that's about the only people that I believed were subject to fungal infection. That's not the case, right?
If you dig around in PubMed, you can start to see that there's a lot more people who are immune competent, who have a fully functioning immune system, who are developing infections without blinking an eye. And the unfortunate part is some of these are some of the really problematic infections that are already drug resistant, like the Candida, glabra. That was, they found it a couple of years ago, remember, like behind switch plates in an ICU that was supposed to be completely sterile, and they didn't really have any recourse for it. So and the hard part is not only are people developing these infections, but we've really backed ourselves into a corner with regards to resistance, because there's the overuse of the drugs in the medical setting, and then there's the overuse in the agricultural and farm setting. We put hundreds of thousands of tons of azole class of antifungals on our food every year. And then to boot, all of our housing construction, the backbone of like pressure treated lumber is a copper azole, so you
Okay.
potentially have, a mold resistance playground developing in your walls ready to go. And what with the study that what came out in 2016, where they saw that gypsum board, because of the way it's made, constructed, created, that paper stays wet. And when that paper
Sure.
stays wet, those spores and the ambient air land on it. So what they did was they did a study where they cut a low circle of gypsum out, they put it in a sterile petri dish with sterile water, and it grew chaetomium, it grew stachy, and I can't remember the other one, but like some of the bigger heavy swingers when it comes to mycotoxin producers.
It makes total sense though when you think about it, because the paper production, right, it's not from dimensional lumber or something. It's from, chopped up wood that's, probably some of it's already decomposing. And that's with any of the wood manufactured products, by the way. You mentioned it in gypsum board. We've done studies with our, in-house studies on individual projects with oriented strand board, OSB, and we were able to find, in core samples, there's active mold growing inside when you wet the sample, inside the material. So that's not environmentally, that didn't happen in the environment where the product was installed. That happened in manufacture.
Yeah. And I would love your opinion on this, because I have a lot of people who come to me and they say, well, what do I do now that I'm remediating and building a healthy home to, try to prevent this from further on? I tell people, I'm like, well, I'm not an IEP, and I'm not a building scientist, and so apparently not even green board is the thing. I've heard something about the like DuPont yellow board, right? And like steel I-beams and all these types
Yeah.
of things,
So I'll throw in my 2 cents. First of all,
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
if you're above grade, well, the big thing is moisture control, right?
Right,
So you
right.
want products that are moisture impervious, or at least moisture resistant, and able to not become food playground. So conventional gypsum board. I love the term green board too, because I don't have one queued up here, but classic thing, we were on a project years back, was big new construction, big assisted living community, all green board on the partition walls, the party walls. So 2 inches of that for fire breaks between the apartments. But they put that in before the roof is on, because they have to drop the panels down. So this green board was covered with mold growth all over it. And then they just finished construction with it bare, entombed in the walls. Point being though, is they're saying, well, it's green board, it's resistant. It's like, no, it's paper. It's like, it's not resistant. So as far as like, if you're going to be in moisture environments, you should be using cementatious type wall boards, like hardy board, things like that, where it's actually masonry board. This is not organic. If you really have to use a gypsum product, then things like Georgia Pacific Dense Armor Plus, I've had great success with that over the years, because again, it's fiberglass and gypsum. Still, can get wet and hold water, but you don't have an organic material there to be a nutrient source.
Right, and that can be really hard to get a hold of from the consumer realm. I fell down
Yeah,
that
because
for
the stores,
hole for that. Yeah.
That's exactly the case, because I've always told people, oh, if you're redoing your basement, you should do that. And the problem is you can get it commercially quite readily, right? Because it's used in commercial construction all the time. So you have to probably go to a wholesaler. Your box stores don't carry it.
Right.
And the sad part is it's only about twice the price.
Right.
Which isn't that much, right? I mean, if you think about it,
Right.
to do a basement, it's like another
remediation,
$1,000 to have material that is pretty much impervious to water. What a great idea.
Right. Yeah. Yeah.
Interesting. Well, so you got into this. Tell us a little bit about your journey. I'd just like to hear, how you went from being, a clinician, working in, general practice, right? That's what you started as, a general practice. And what steered you down this path? Because this is a very specific route you're on.
This is a very specific route.
Very specific.
Yeah. It's, how things kind of like point you in a direction throughout your life. I've always been very curious about kind of the mushroom and the fungus realm. I remember in med school, there was a medicinal mushrooms course. And then I found out about Paul Stamets and, all the cool stuff that can be done with like turkey tail and these medicinal mushrooms for immune system shifting. And so that was always kind of, back there, it was a cool thing, because usually our medications come from plants. And so it was different kingdom, different benefits. So that was always curious to me. But as, I got out into practice, I hung my shingle, I moved to Waterbury, Vermont. And the name is so Ekpo. We've had two floods here. And in fact, we have a brick building downtown, and they are in a floodplain, and they don't dredge the rivers anymore because of the ecological impact. So the rivers go from being deep to shallow. And because of all the watersheds in mountainous Vermont, people don't realize that flooding is possible up here, because you take, displaced water for miles and miles and dump it into the valleys, which is where Waterbury is. And so we had a flood in like the 1920s, and you can see a flood marker up on the brick building that actually shows like second story where this was. Yeah. And then in 2011, before I moved here, there was a second flood from Hurricane Irene, and it wasn't as substantial as the 1920 ones, but of course any flood is going to cause great social impact. Like, we were a FEMA disaster for a while. So when I came into practice in 2013, naturopathic medicine, like, we got it when it comes to like fatigue and all these things that can't really be normally treated by Western medicine. And the things I was doing was just not sticking. And I remember having a dialogue with someone and just asking about their environment, because environmental medicine was always something I really enjoyed in school. And they had mentioned that their home office was in their basement. And they had mentioned that there was a flood here a couple of years ago. And that really just started that process going, and doing some research in mold. And of course, even in naturopathic medical school, like, we had a little small section on mold, and it was from the allergy perspective. It wasn't even from the toxin perspective. So all of this self-study that I did realistically came after school. And so that really spurred me to look more into the mycotoxin field. And then as I found out more about the mycotoxin field, I discovered Richie Shoemaker's work and the work of SIRS. And then I went and got SIRS certified. And then I realized I couldn't apply that to every case. And, realistically, that's not how the world works anyway. Like, there's many things that can cause issues for people. So then I kind of went back to square one, knowing what I now knew about SIRS, and really found a happy medium in my practice with dealing with the toxic component first and then the inflammatory component. And as a result, I started becoming involved with ICI, the International Society for Environmentally Acquired Illness, and started with their board, and then became secretary, then vice president, and now president. And our goal there is to really help educate other physicians about the intricacies and complexities of this field, and so that they can really work to better help folks. And it's not just clinicians, it's also IEPs too. Like,
that was my question, is like, what's the constituency of that organization?
Yeah, so it's mostly healthcare professionals, and we have opened it up to people beyond prescriptive authority, but we let people know that there are a time and place for needing a physician who can prescribe and order. But it's still great to have a mental health expert who understands mold exposure and how it can impact depression and anxiety. So we have people from all walks of life there, and they can all kind of sit through training, but we ask them to still only take what is applicable to their scope of practice, right? So we also have in that realm IEPs, and a lot of people I have expressed reticence. Well, they say, well, can't Joe Schmo from the dry out remediation service from down the street just sign up and say that he knows how to do XYZ? And we actually have it set up where what we require is an IEP with at least 10 years of field practice, who also has a working relationship with a physician who is literate in environmental medicine or mold exposure. And so that way we know that someone already has had the boots on the ground and the experience of working with someone who is very sick, or at least understands that they might have to go above and beyond, or suggest a more thorough remediation plan to help these people get back to even keel. So, and we invite IEPs who, are looking to learn more too. So there's kind of a step-by-step process where someone can join as kind of like a general member, but before we actually put people on the find a professional page, we want to make sure that they have those credentials and that experience.
So you're doing some sort of vetting, obviously.
We are.
Going into
We
that.
we are. We have a whole entire committee and employees dedicated to doing the vetting, and it's not easy work.
No, well, I mean, it's tough. I mean, honestly, I've been a consultant in the industry for 35 years now, ish. Maybe it's going on 36. I'm getting too old to remember. And we were involved in remediation too for many, many years in the industry. So I've worn multiple hats, and now have potential clients ask for competent contractors or somebody competent consultant in another another region, another state. And I do know a lot of people in the industry, but in general I'm not really comfortable anymore with the fact referring people. I'm just not, as a professional, because I really don't know what somebody else is going to do in actual practice.
Right.
That's a tough situation. So so what's your general thoughts on mold remediation? And again, I it's a loaded question, right? Because you're a physician, but you have to have at least some opinions.
Yeah, I mean, I have plenty of opinions, right?
I mean, some that you'll actually share on the some that you'll share on the show, as opposed to the ones that you have off camera.
Right. I have seen some really severe remediation failures, and I have a core company that I use up here, both for my testing and separately for my remediation. I always keep those two parties separate. However, we have a really great working opportunity, working relationship with one another, where I know if I pick up the phone and I call XYZ and I'm like, hey, client incoming, we have these things going on, super sensitive, can you do a thorough workup? So I am very blessed in that I have a team that I trust and who trusts me. And together we've seen each other's work. We've seen each other's interventions really benefit clients. Mm-hmm. But then there's been times where, for understandable reasons, people have hired outside contractors, maybe because they were quoted cheaper, and I understand the financial implications firsthand of what happens with this kind of stuff. And I have seen remediations fail to the point that remediation dust is left after the negative containment is taken down, like not going in and
so inside the actual work area was still left there.
Yep. And stuff where if we only take the bottom 4 feet of a wall, then everything else is fine within the wall chamber, to the point that remediation value has surpassed the value of the house standing mm-hmm. as is.
I've seen it many times.
Yeah. And that's why I always get really excited when someone's like, I live in an apartment. I'm like, oh, mm-hmm. Yes. It while you're not as protected from like OSHA standards, there still is inhabitability that's inferred with renting out to people. And I've seen horrendous things with apartments, don't get me wrong. Some states are a little bit better than others, but there's virtually no protection. The only difference is you might be able to break a rental agreement and move out versus you're stuck with a mortgage and now with a moldy home. And so that's why I tend to be a little bit more thankful when someone can live in an apartment when they come to me. So
yeah, it's I can't even tell you, the hundreds and hundreds of cases that I've been involved with over my career, the same thing. And it's funny that you had mentioned people that actually do dealing with the mental aspects. I swear, as an an indoor environmental expert and having to be out there as a professional, I've spent my fair share doing marriage counseling, I swear, in the field, because that's honestly, and I'm sure some people in the audience are going to concur with that. You get caught in situations highly stressful, especially if you have, children that are affected, that are ill. I mean, the stress and the family is it's unbelievable. Plus there's financial stress. And if there's litigation going on, which, obviously always gets protracted, right? Always, because that's part of the game in the insurance world and stuff. The deep pockets, bleed the shallow pockets, and that's how they win.
Right.
And it's not a pretty industry.
No, it's not. And that's why when I see someone come in with a partner, I either know it's going to be a difficult visit or a really great visit,
Depending on the support, right?
depending on the support,
Yeah, because a lot of times people
and
psychologically go, they're crazy.
they're crazy.
Yeah,
Yeah, and
yeah.
people forget that your genetic detoxes are different, and they'll say, "Well, how come they feel this way, but I don't?" It's like, okay, well, let's break this down. Let's talk about this a little bit. And similarly, in those situations, you might see a mom and one kid be reactive, and a dad and the other kid not, and you're like, okay, well, guess who got the good detox genes in the family? So yeah, it's really heartbreaking. And then the other thing is like, just because um, someone might, and this goes back to our volume knob metaphor that unfortunately we weren't live for at the time. But a mom might come in, let's just say, and she's really, really sick, but then we find out that she has a history of Epstein-Barr virus and Lyme disease and all these other things, and then the mold is acting as an immune system suppression for these kind of like chronic sticky infections to inflame her system, whereas dad might have a little bit of a sniffle kind of thing going on, a little bit of allergy, but he's not knocked down and dragged out the way mom is. And I try to remind people, like, there can be more than one thorn in the lion's paw. There can be
Yeah, and
more
totally
than one.
unrelated, right? That
Right.
together they'll have a synergistic effect that's bad.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
Well, that's what makes it so tough. I mean, this is, it's obviously, from the medical community, it's got to be super challenging to try to, to peel back the layers of that onion and find it. But as the field consultants, it's tough too, because we don't have the medical expertise, and, we typically don't have all the data, and there's usually not financial resources for us to do a thorough enough thing. So we're always, to some extent, compromised on what data we have to make opinions based on.
Right.
It's a tough situation.
Right. And I think the harder part, one of the hard parts is being the first person on site for these things, both medically and in the environment. When people come to me, they've already been through XYZ. We've already gone through different pathways. We can check that off, check that off, check that off, and we have a little bit more clarity with what's happening. Again, my practice is life after mold. People are coming to me because they have health issues that they've connected to mold in their home, and it's just the opportunities for us to work through it are far open.
Sure. You've got people that are already open, and probably in a lot of cases already on their last wit's end of how they're going to address their situation, right?
Right. And that allows us to go slow and move through things. I hate to say it, but when people have been sick for like 5, 6, 10, 15 years, and I come in, I say, it's going to take a while to get better. You might not see improvement for like 3 to 6 months with some of these interventions. And sometimes full recovery might take a year, might take 2, might take 3. There might be some things we can do, some things we can't. And people are like, I've been sick for long enough. Like, right. Sure, what's another couple of months? It's the folks who are sick recently.
They don't want to hear 6 months to diagnose their problem.
Right, but then at the same time, those people can sometimes recover pretty quick because they haven't had such long exposure. So it's a hard dance for the kind of newer cases.
So you do see there's an effect of how long somebody's had the issue. That's a timeline is part of the factor.
I think there is. So when I think about the body system, I think of like a toxin like bucket or like a sink or something, where we have the inflow of what goes into body, and then we have an outflow here of how the cup gets drained, how the sink gets drained. And so for certain people, their cup might always have this space where they're always half full. Their body's always kind of not at wit's end when it comes to toxins.
They have headroom, basically.
Right, yeah. They have headroom, exactly. But the interesting part about mycotoxins is they can go in and they can plug up that exit hole. They actually interfere with their own detox of other mycotoxins and hormones and all these issues. And so what will end up happening is their cup will get fuller over time, and then they have less headroom, and then kind of every insult they bump into can cause a spillover and cause these issues. So the longer you're in that space, potentially the fuller your cup is. So I do see a bit of a correlation with with severity, with exposure length.
So that's another challenge because I mean, and you probably see, I'm sure in your time in practice, you've seen all the above, right? You've had people that are just recently experienced maybe a mold related issue in their living quarters or their workspace, and people that have been chronically dealing with this for decades, right? You get all the
Right.
above.
All the above. All
Uh,
the above for
So,
sure.
so we're gonna just to let the audience know, we'll start letting you put questions in there. So what we'd like you to do though is do a hand raise. So Susan, our moderator, Susan Valenti's in the background. She's the editor of Healthy Indoors magazine, and she's on your chat line. You can raise your hand or ask the question there, and she'll be able to help you out with that. Susan, you have a question, I take it. I'm gonna let you jump in.
Actually, Lauren, actually, Sue Ann Dunford actually wanted to know earlier, do you take consultations or clients outside of Vermont?
I do, but in those particular instances, we're doing more of an educational wellness consult where we're talking kind of globally about your case, and you maintain a local relationship with your physician who is aware of us working together, and then everything that we dialogue with you, you then have to run through them and they make the adjustments and final say on the care. So yes, I do. But in those cases, I can't write you prescriptions for medications, and I specifically cannot order those labs, nor can I specifically diagnose you. It's kind of just almost like health coaching in that way.
Exactly. And then I had one other question that you had brought up, because I find this fascinating that you actually have, almost like like an IEP team for consulting and for remediation yourself, and I imagine that part of that is because you personally have dealt with some of these issues, but as a doctor, that's also a very interesting thing, and my question is could that be the answer to a lot of these medical issues that doctors do have kind of like a like an IEP team that they can consult with, that they can refer out to. A lot of people in our profession have always talked about how there is no one prescription that like a consultant can write, but of course medical doctors can write plenty of prescriptions, but I'm curious how well the medical community and I guess like an IEP could work together to kind of solve these problems quicker.
Right. One of the things I tell my clients is if someone tells you that you can stay in mold and get better, you need to run for the hills. They're going to waste your time. They're going to waste your money. It is necessary for the body, remember the cup metaphor, to get out of exposure long enough or get into a different type of exposure. There's no such thing as perfection. There's only better or different. To have enough time, to get enough headspace, as Bob puts it, to be able to recover. And so there are physicians out there who say, you can stay in your home, and they put you on, expensive IVs, and all these different things that just chew through people's resources, when in actuality, I'd rather have people put that money towards getting the home remediated, improved, and then recovery. Because ultimately, when you remediate a home and you do some of those correcting, you're not just removing mold. They're going to go in there with air scrubbers. They're going to be maybe cleaning out some of the ambient other stuff in the air that you didn't realize was there the whole entire time. So there are unforeseen benefits with remediation. And so for me, remediation is really important, and it really needs to be done right. And you need to really be able to find a remediation team that you trust. So if any physicians are listening, don't be afraid to pick up the phone and call other IEPs in your area. You can start with digging around just to start on the ACAC to try to find just a list of names, and then go through there.
Honestly, that's voluntary certifications, and that does not ensure. common sense, and
Yep.
certainly not integrity. All it shows is that you can pass a multiple choice test, and the same is true for New York State, and other states with their licensing programs.
Yeah.
There's no actual, demonstrative practice in the field that you have to, pass some sort of a practical exam.
And I agree. And so when people are using the ACAC, I ask them to use it as a Rolodex. So if you're a physician, pulling up an ACAC list and then calling and seeing if you could get an IEP on the phone who cares enough to talk to you for a few minutes about, your cases, or create a meeting for a little bit, because an IEP will also understand, I think what makes a good IEP is them understanding A, the impacts of health, and B, also being a smart business person, saying, well, I know if I work with this physician, I'm more than likely to get references and to work with people and expand my business. And usually that shows for me at least someone who cares.
Mm-hmm.
If you can't get an IEP on the phone and they're not going to answer questions, they're probably not someone you want to run parallel with. But I know I can pick up my IEP, my phone right now, and call my IEP and call my remediator and check in with them. And I think that's where a lot of the rubber meets the road. And I have been educated very thoroughly from the two of them. And they have also been, and this is the key, open and receptive to hearing, some of the things that I have to say. In the beginning, they were like, wait, you need me to do what for this person? How is that different from the current remediation that we do? What does that look like? And then, there's a remediation failure and they see the health issue and they go, oh, okay, we're going to come back in. We're going to tidy that up. We're going to do the third-party testing again. And, it's all clear. So it's just the relationship. I really feel like the relationship with the IEP is really the cornerstone. Because after that, it's you guys are teamworking it and you're figuring it out for the client.
But you're not often able, as the client, to have that environment, because again, if it's an insurance claim, there might be some they may not, the client may not have as much control as they should have, or legally they're supposed to, but you know how that goes, right? They get a contractor forced down their throat, things get done a certain way, the water only went up 12 inches, so we're going to cut out 16 inches of drywall. It's that kind of nonsense. Whereas, and I'm going to get blowback for even saying that just now, but I'm a firm believer in an environment, it's cheaper to take out sheetrock than it is to try to salvage sheetrock. I don't understand that. I can't, and I can't say what's in the interstitial space unless I tear it out. But anyway, I'm going to invite everybody in our virtual studio audience to kick your cameras on now. We're in Q&A mode. You can show your faces. Stay muted though. Raise your hand to ask the question, and we'll bring you in and let you ask questions of Dr. Tessier. I don't see any questions. Terry Sofer's in. There he is. He's not bashful to turn his cameras on. I know many people are just they're not comfortable turning their cameras on, but you should do it. There we go. Susan had posted a thing earlier, and I know you kind of cursory covered this, but she posted this to me earlier on before the show started. The term research to practice is something that's we did a show last week on that, talking about academia dealing with field practitioners, whether it be the IEPs or contractors, and not just for mold, just in general indoor environmental. Do you see that there's a disconnect between the medical community and field practitioners? It seems like you're kind of describing that, right? You have a good working relationship, but is that normally the case?
No, it's not normally the case. It's not normally the case at all. That good working connection is if any IEPs are listening, Google mold literate physician or go on ICI.org and just look at the practitioner map and see if there's a practitioner near you that you can dialogue with. Because for as many of folks that are out there, there's just as many physicians who don't have a reliable team. And sometimes they are too busy or too scared to reach out, or for all these different reasons. So I think IEPs don't realize what a gift they could bestow themselves into someone's lap, because we don't work unless we have a team that works. My treatment is not successful unless someone's in a healthy home.
It makes total sense, right? Because especially if their illness or part of their illness is being driven by environmental factors, you're not going to medicate your way around that. No. Yeah, it makes total sense. Here's a question for you. This is the next loaded question in the show. Is mold testing necessary? And if it is, who should be doing it? Because there's, and what kind of criteria should we be using for mold testing? I know you have some opinions on that one.
From what realm? Human or environmental?
Oh boy, no, environmental. Actually, it's
okay.
not yes, because humans are different. Actually
even
both.
the human testing is not perfect.
No, let's address both of those.
Let's
actually,
do this.
I was thinking from environmental, but you raised an interesting thing, because I've heard all different types of medical testing being done on clients, like A to Z, and they don't necessarily make sense to me, but I'm not a practitioner.
Right. So let's say if someone, this is just an example, if someone's peeing blood, they come into you, they're peeing blood, you're going to pull every possible lab that's going to be related to peeing blood. You're going to pull a comprehensive metabolic panel. You're going to do a urine dipstick. You're going to do all these things. When you're dealing with mold, it's the same idea, but it's a little bit more complicated in the human body, in that you need to understand the clinical question that the test is answering. There's so many physicians that use that whole blood in the pee metaphor, where they go, okay, everything kidney related, I'm going to draw on a test and I'm going to catch a wide net and figure out what's going on. If you toss a really wide net in mold, because of all the immune system disturbance it caused, because it can bioaccumulate in tissues, the mold toxins specifically, so I'm talking about not mold in general, you can get all these different funky labs. And those labs will be different depending on if you're using a liquid chromatography test, an ELISA test, the type of methodology of the labs. So what I tell people when they're training to really teach to do this work is, shooting from the hip with mold illness is only going to open up chaos in the situation. What you need to do instead is find out the clinical answer that you want and work back and use the test that's going to best answer that. And so that becomes being really, you really need to get familiar with the testing, because urine mycotoxin test, there's mycotoxins in our food. Those tend to be usually aflatoxin and ochratoxin, but those can
There's a lot of
spike
it,
on
though,
urine mycotoxin.
potentially, right? If you eat nuts and things like that, you're going to be exposed to that.
Right, exactly. But we also know from the animal literature that inhalation is the highest bioavailable route when it comes to even the trichothecene group of mycotoxins. So, when you start to know the intricacies of a lab, I can usually look at a urine mycotoxin test, and if there's a spike, meaning more is leaving the body, if it's a gross spike up in the 20s or, tenfold, I can usually ask someone to look back into their environment and find something. And if they haven't changed their diet and there hasn't been any big shifts and differences, that huge dramatic increase in that mycotoxin is less likely to come from the food variable. So what I'm getting into here is knowing the test, knowing the limitations of the test, knowing the benefits of the test, and also having enough clinical experience with the test and saying, I've seen this pattern before and this is what it looks like. And so in my work with clients, the ELISA version of the urine mycotoxin test is the tool that I find the most helpful. Well, other people find better ways to use some of the other tools for sure, but this is the thing that works for me, and it tends to correlate with clients. And so with that being said, to pan back out, a lot of our labs are faulty because they don't tell you everything that you want and need to know. And if you're confused about the question you're answering, you're not going to get a clear answer, which is very similar with environmental testing. I think a lot of mold doctors get super pumped about an ERMI, and ERMI must be less than 2. And that's something that Shoemaker in the SIRS camp in the 90s put that score together. And we know the limitations of ERMI. It started off as kind of an EPA research tool, and then somehow
it was never meant to go to the field to be used in general application.
Right.
Ever.
Right. And, the hard part is they slap one number on variables that can just be all over the place because of how that number is crunched. And so the benefit that I really find in these things is working with MSQ-PCR. So using that kind of DNA testing. Is it the M trap is what they call it for the MSQ PCR? Using that instead of the ERMI, because at least then I can say, oh, that's a really problematic species versus, oh, that species maybe not as potent of a mycotoxin producer. So I found the speciation component to be the most helpful. I do find it important to at least get some type of baseline or testing for a person and a home, because if you don't do that baseline testing, you don't know when to stop. You know, if you don't do the baseline testing on a home and testing after remediation, I don't know if the home is now something that we can cross off our list and say, okay, that brain fog, let's go work up your history of Lyme disease versus the mold stuff that you had just been working on.
But that raises the question, though, what's your baseline testing, right? Because there's so many different variables there.
Right.
You know, I mean, the classic in this industry, it's a double-edged sword, right? When the cassette spore trap was invented in the mid 90s, when we didn't have to no longer lithium grease slides and put them in Allergencos or Burkhardt's, you know, it was a great thing. It was a perfect day, right? You could easily handle spore trap, and everybody started doing spore traps. The problem is, right, there's some limitations there with what you can find with a spore trap. Right. I'm not saying throw the baby out with the bathwater, but it's limited.
Right.
So what do you prescribe? What would you prescribe for, you know, baseline testing? I mean, and again, I know that's not your expertise necessarily, but you're involved in it.
Right. Baseline testing. See, that's the hard part. You know, again, I'm not an IEP, and I really bow to the IEPs out there.
Yeah, and I probably wasn't fair to ask you that question either. You know,
what I hope for at least is someone who's not going to come in and just do a visual and say, I don't see anything, so there's not a problem. So what I expect, at least from the minimum for people, is, you know, the hygrometer, infrared, maybe even particle counter. Someone who's actually willing to do in-wall sample, because I do find that information can be valuable. I've had a couple of cases where it has been the thing that has been really important. And, you know, someone who can look and say, well, that pipe is a drain pipe. It's likely to carry cold water through that wall. Let's look and see if there's like a temperature drop. And if there's a temperature drop, there might be condensation, and maybe we should sample there. So I leave a lot of the testing up to my IEP, because I know that they have a concept of building science, I guess, and where things can hide and be problematic. And you know, they'll do an ERMI if need be, and again, it's more for the MSQ PCR technology there. But you know, there's also the limitations of if you don't catch it, you know, and that's, you know, that's the hard part. So it's really hard to get a baseline. One of the things that I've kind of titrated that down to, or diluted it down to, is there's no such thing as perfect. Better is what we're looking for. So sometimes for someone that might mean moving away from a house that has a high count of Stachy, which, you know, you're not going to find very well on the air test, but they go into a home that maybe has a little bit more Orobasidium or something like that, but the rest of the numbers look good. So I wish I knew more about building science. I wish I knew more about the ins and outs of testing. I'm always willing to learn more. And so that's why I feel really confident in my team. And I know I'm very lucky on that front to have people that I can defer to.
I mean, I would say that, you know, just in our brief conversation here, you know more than most medical doctors that I've spoken with on the topic. So I'm pretty impressed with your you know, understanding of the environmental testing side of things. Is there any good mold information available on social media, or, you know, on the internet? Come on. I mean, we all see it. I mean, there's
yeah. First of all, I have to say that I went on the Healthy Indoors Instagram last night, and I was very pleased by the quality of memes that were on there. So whoever's doing your memes for you guys, I got a chuckle out of some of them.
Oh boy, yeah, I they're gonna love that.
Yeah, because they got their finger on the pulse for sure with some of the memes that have been kicking around. So I definitely
We have a new
giggled few
team,
times.
and it's a
Yeah.
very young team. We'll just leave it at
Yeah,
that.
no, exactly. No, but they're
It's
hitting the
actually a
mark.
teenage team running Instagram.
Yeah, it's
But
actually a teenage team doing it.
honest to
young
God,
one.
it's like,
Yeah.
we're old codgers doing everything else with the organization, but our Instagram team is very
Young.
young.
Well, they got it. I was very excited about that last night. I was like, that's different. I appreciate that. That is not what other people are doing for social media, and that's exciting. And so that's the hard thing is you've heard the intricacy of our conversation so far, and there are a lot of people who try to take what we just said and go and put it into one tiny little statement, and that doesn't cover it. And brevity is cool. Brevity is great, but brevity can also be a disservice. And so you see in a lot of the dialogue where people are saying, mold illness is SIRS. It's like, well, that's one facet, or, you have to burn your house down because of the mold. And it's like, no, like you might have a mold issue up in the top corner of your roof deck, but potentially the clothes in your children's closet that has good ventilation and is far away from that area might actually be okay. And so there can be a huge benefit to the social media groups. I have had clients who have come in and have actually gotten decent information there. They've started their process thanks to those groups. But then you also see groups where it's like, you'll never get better, and you can't live in any house, and you got to move to the desert and live in a tent. And for some people, that has been their experience and that's their truth, but that is not the truth for everyone. So social media, it has its pros and its cons in this process.
I think it's important, always to try to be the voice of reason, whatever aspect, whatever role you play in the group of people addressing it, whether you're on the consulting side, whether you're on the actual contractor side, whether you're on the medical side, it's like being the voice of reason and trying to, like I think you hit the nail on the head that there's nothing, you're not going to reach perfection. It doesn't happen. There's not one single perfect environment that any of us are in. So the idea is to improve the environment incrementally and try to get it to a point where it's a space where somebody can be okay there.
Mm-hmm.
So this is, by the way, I wish I had another hour with you right now, because this has been fantastic.
Come back on. I've actually had a really, really enjoyable time. So let me know.
Well, there you go. Maybe we'll even bring you on. We have a monthly nighttime show called Healthy Indoors After Hours, which is 90 minutes, and it's a different format because we actually consume alcohol and everything else there. So it's it's a totally different format. If you think this is loose, if you take this and loosen it up like tenfold, this particular show. So and it's an evening broadcast. So anyway, final thoughts or anything you'd like to close out on, just that burning point we didn't cover. We covered a lot, but it doesn't seem like we covered everything we should. Or just a closing wrap up, something and
maybe this is me with being sentimental, and a big part of my family is in the mental health field, and so but maybe that's part of it. But when you start dealing with mold, you are essentially destroying and navigating the foundation of healthy psychology. So there's this concept of Abraham Maslow's hierarchy of needs, and the bottom is like home, food, security, and then there's like social, and then as you go up the pyramid, you get to deal more with the complexities of the human experience. So like there's the spiritual aspect and all these different things, and existential, able to navigate existential things and all this stuff. But when you're dealing with mold, you're going into the base of the pyramid and you're just like knocking it out. That is the core, and that is the foundation for people. And people suffer trauma as a result of this, not just as a result of having your home taken out from under you, but also of being chronically sick. And so what I remind people is, sometimes there has to be a rewiring of the nervous system. Your body, after going through recovery, now needs to be told that it is okay and it is safe. So that way your physiology can actually go back to its normal state. There's a whole field of it, psychoneuroimmunology. And so what I tell people is, you didn't get sick overnight. Most of us didn't get sick overnight. You're not going to get better overnight, but that also means that at this moment in time, you do not need to rush to the outcome. The best thing that you can do is move in slow and measured and reassured paces. And if you don't have the community and team to help you through that, you need to find that community and team first of all. Um, because security, psychosocial and mental emotional security, is what is going to get you through this whole entire turmoil. So, instead of being like, oh, mold's dangerous, it's just dig in. Sometimes your power is going to come from yourself. Sometimes you're going to be lucky and have a supportive self or a mom or a cousin or a sister or a friend. But wherever you can find that support, really cherish it, hold on to it, strengthen it, and know that that is going to be the thing that's going to help you navigate this difficult stuff.
Wow, that was actually moving. Fantastic. It really was. Yeah, we're at that time, unfortunately. This is every week. I always feel this little mental angst of ending the show. So I always feel like there's more to need to be covered. But in this case, in particular, I would do 3 hours with you in a heartbeat on a show here, because I think it's just been just a breath of fresh air and just some great information. So we definitely would like to have you back.
I would love that.
What we'll definitely do here is, it's quick plug for what we're doing with the site and what we do with Healthy Indoors. So our primary site for our organization, our digital media organization, is healthyindoors.com. That's really where the repository of all of our back issues of the magazine, 8 years of the magazine, reside there, as well as our video shows and the audio podcast of the shows. A lot of other resources you can get to too. In particular is our online community, though, which we opened officially to the general public yesterday. And this is, Lauren, this will be new for you too. So this is a platform that's strictly dedicated to indoor environments. It's think of it as social media and a networking and we can live stream to it. There can be events there can be training. It's pretty much, it is a central hub for indoor environmental topics, of which mold is one. What's great is it's also available free worldwide. We have a premium level that there is a pay for that to actually get to some premium content and some stuff that's not readily accessible. But most of the platform is free to everyone. So we really think you should take advantage of that. You can get to it by going to healthyindoors.com and clicking on the community tab in the upper menu, and that will get you to be able to sign up to become part of it. We do have a little bit of a cohorting process, because unlike Facebook or LinkedIn, you don't just get to sign up and get thrown into, to the wolves. We actually want to bring you through and actually meet you and help pair you up, because it's really not just a place to post discussions, although that's great, but we'd like you to be able to actually engage with other people and network with people of like interests or people that you find interesting. So anyway,
that's really exciting. I haven't seen anyone do anything like that yet. So that's wonderful, and that's going to be a huge service. Thank you for that.
That's really, that's what, I will tell you, Susan and I have been working on this for a long time, and it's like, it seems longer than it was, but it's been a lot to put this beast together. But honestly, we're really excited. I sound like the proud father here now, having it out there, but it's new. There's not many people there, but we anticipate it's going to grow exponentially very quickly. So we're really excited about it. So Dr. Lauren Tessier, just fantastic. So life after mold. Do you take clients from outside? Do people travel to you from afar?
Oh yeah.
I'm assuming, right? Because you're a specialist. It seems like you are offering some assistance that maybe people can't get locally.
And I do have people travel from all around the country, and I understand that sometimes that's not possible for people. So in those situations, going to ICI.org, that's ISEAI, not the letter C, but like the ocean, ICI, and go to the Find Help page. It's not just me out there that exists. And to follow up on that really quick, I'm not going to be everyone's cup of tea.
Sure.
Dr. Susie over there is not going to be everyone's cup of tea, and so I just invite people to, search around, find someone who resonates with you, because that's going to be another part of treatment. You're going to want to be motivated to interact with someone that you actually like and not someone that you dislike. So shop around for sure, guys. And,
I guess that's really, that's super important, right? That you actually find a physician, just like a consultant, right? You have to shop for your consultant too.
For sure.
I'm going to post that up in the, let me just get the, SEAI, right? You think I would have this in the lower thirds ready to go already, but no, I do not.
No
It's
problem.
live television. So
It's actually in the chat.
yeah, but that doesn't help anybody that's watching it.
True.
There you go. ISEAI.org. O-R-G, not O-G-R. Oh my God, I put up ogre. It's not ogre. Yeah. Well, this is like your camera moving around. So this is my rebuttal to your camera. Oh my goodness gracious. Yeah, it's classic. There we go. Look at that.
And,
oh no, I gotta take it down, put it back up here. Oh, okay.
And people can find me on Instagram, YouTube, Facebook, and even Pinterest. I'm kind of working on, we'll see. And the handles all there are Life After Mold. And then if you swing by my website, there is a Mold Prevention 101, which is going to be super base with regards to some of the information, but it's like, do you have a sweating pipe? You might want to address that. Do you need French drains? Is your grate, so stuff that gives people at least a report card to go around their house and say, oh, maybe I should call someone in to address that. Or, so it's the Mold Prevention 101. And when you sign up for our email list, you'll get it sent to you. And I really only send out probably like 5 emails a year. I'm bad with marketing on that. So
one of the things you could do is you could actually come over and put a space over on the community. But
that's true.
We'll talk about that.
We will. Absolutely.
I'm going to be hawking that to everybody now till the end of eternity. So that's just the way it is. So I guess that's where we're at. We're overtime as always. And, such is life. 60 minutes is just too fleeting a time period to actually talk about what we need to talk about. But anyway, thanks again so very much, Lauren, for joining us today. We'll be back next week, next Thursday, same time, same bat channel, 1 to 2 p.m. Eastern for the Healthy Indoors live show. Until that time, I'm your host, Bob Krell. Stay healthy and stay happy. We'll see you soon.